Okay, check this out. Watch this.
All right, let's see it.
How can you claim a 6,000-year-old Earth when carbon-14 results are coming back 50,000 years?
The 6,000-year-old Earth actually comes from the historical record of the Bible.
The Bible is not a historical record. It is a rhetorical record. It certainly has history in it, but only insofar as it is being leveraged to serve the interests of other rhetorical goals. Nobody who wrote anything that went into the Bible prioritized being historical over all else. History is always subordinated to other rhetorical goals in the Bible.
Carbon dating does produce ages typically around 50,000 years, say.
So it almost sounds like these content creators are suggesting that C14 dating keeps telling us the Earth is about 50,000 years old. And if that is what they are saying, then that is wildly inaccurate. The Earth is significantly older than that. But 50,000 years is about the upper limit of reliability of C14 dating, because what that method of dating is doing is measuring the amount of C14 in a sample. And because we know the half-life of C14, it's a little under 6,000 years, and we can look at a variety of different means of calibration to determine how much C14 was in the atmosphere in a given time period. If we know how much C14 is left, we can go say, oh, that means this sample started to decay. It died and started to decay around this time period. But when we get to around 50,000 years ago, the amount of C14 left in a sample is so minuscule that it's very difficult to be very precise and reliable with dating, and any kind of contamination can increasingly skew those results. So 50,000 years is about the upper limit. It's not that results keep telling us the Earth is 50,000 years old. So if that is what these content creators are saying, they are wildly off base. The Earth is billions of years old, and we have multiple different methods of dating that converge on the accepted results.
But when we take into account things like the decay in the Earth's magnetic field, which means that more and more carbon-14 is being produced today than was in the past.
So C14 dating has been taking that into account for over 50 years. It was in the 60s that scientists first produced calibration curves based on tree rings, where they could actually see changes in the amount of C14 in the atmosphere, and they used that to calibrate their raw dating to arrive at more reliable dates for specific samples. So the notion that this is something that people who use C14 to test samples didn't know about or are not adequately incorporating into their scholarship is laughably misinformed.
And when we take into account the effects of the flood, which would have dramatically changed the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12, then we find that those 50,000-year dates actually contract back to around the time of the flood.
There are absolutely no data in any of the natural sciences that make a worldwide flood even a plausibility, much less a probability. So there is no way to measure what kinds of changes happened. And so if you just presuppose a flood, what you do is figure out what kinds of changes are needed for a calibration of C14 dating to result in a 6,000-year-old Earth. And then you just assert, oh, well, those are exactly the changes that took place. And then you reconstruct the conditions to provide those changes. But the reality is that you cannot find any data anywhere in any natural sciences that makes a global flood a plausibility, much less a probability. So that cannot really be an explanation for why C14 dating has an upper limit of around 50,000 years.
Which, according to Bible history, was about 4,500 years ago.
Of course, we have trees and architecture and texts and iconography and human remains and all kinds of geologic data that go back significantly further than 4,500 and even 6,000 years ago. There are no data that support even the plausibility of a global flood, much less the probability. There was no global flood. That is a dogma that one chooses to accept, and then if they want to try to appeal to science to try to support it, they have to subordinate science to that dogma so that they can tergiversate the data and the scientific methodologies and theories and findings, just like they've done here by lying about the lack of calibration in C14 dating, and then just arbitrarily asserting that presupposing a global flood and presupposing all of the conditions that make a global flood something that happened 4,500 years ago that entirely changed the amount of C14 and C12 in the atmosphere. Like, this is all just dogmatism. None of this is supported by any data.
That provides a wonderful calibration point for all carbon dates.
Follow or subscribe to see much more.
Now, I'm good, but the fit for this video has been amphibia.